From the outside, Lisa Marie Presley's life looked like destiny fulfilled. The daughter of Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, born into the empire of Graceland itself. Her name alone carried a kind of divine inheritance, a promise that the Presley legacy would live on through her. But behind the lights, fame, and photographs of her childhood in Memphis, Lisa Marie's life was never truly her own. The girl born into American royalty was living inside a story written by others. And in 2008, one DNA test would tear that story apart. For 40 years, Lisa Marie Presley believed she knew who she was. She believed that she was born to Elvis and Priscilla Presley on February 1, 1968, at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis. She believed the fairy tale the public adored, that she was the symbol of her parents' great love, the living link to the king. But by her 40th birthday, that image had begun to crack. Years of stress, health scares, and the pressures of carrying the Presley name had driven Lisa to undergo a routine genetic screening. It was meant to check for hereditary heart conditions. What it uncovered instead would unravel the very core of her identity. The results arrived in late 2008. At first, she barely looked at them. The pages were filled with medical jargon, risk markers, and genetic notations. But when she reached the section titled Maternal Mitochondrial DNA, something caught her eye. The markers listed did not align with the known lineage of Priscilla Presley. The data suggested a total absence of maternal connection. Lisa called the lab in disbelief, insisting it had to be an error. They assured her the tests were accurate. She ordered a retest, this time through an independent facility in Texas and another in Switzerland. All three produced the same conclusion. There was zero maternal match. At first, Lisa told no one. For weeks she avoided calls, interviews, and even her own family. She buried the lab reports in a locked drawer at her Calabasas home and tried to convince herself it was a clerical mistake. But the thought wouldn't go away. How could she share DNA with Elvis Presley, the father whose music she had inherited, whose eyes she carried, but not share blood with the woman who had raised her? The mystery consumed her. By early 2009, she had begun her own quiet investigation. She called the hospital in Memphis where she had been born, only to be told that her birth files were sealed. Privacy laws, they said. But when she pressed further, her attorneys uncovered something even more disturbing. The original hospital birth log for February 1, 1968, had missing entries. One baby girl listed under the name Presley appeared without an attending physician's signature. Several other pages were blacked out. Another document looked suspiciously like adoption paperwork. Lisa's heart sank. Every new lead deepened her dread. What if the DNA results weren't wrong? What if her entire life had been built on a secret buried since 1968? By 2010, word of her private investigation had begun to circulate quietly within the Presley inner circle. Longtime employees whispered about arguments between Lisa and her mother. Graceland's staff noticed Lisa's absence from key family events. To outsiders, she appeared reclusive, but in truth, Lisa was following a trail of shadows, piecing together fragments of a story that had been erased. In 2011, she tracked down a retired nurse who had worked at Baptist Memorial that winter. The nurse remembered a woman arriving under heavy security weeks before Lisa's supposed birth. She remembered sealed rooms, handwritten instructions, and a young staffer in tears. The nurse didn't remember names, only that it felt like someone was hiding something big. The more Lisa uncovered, the more one name began to surface: Lucy Dearbonnell Fowle. Lucy was a quiet presence in Elvis Presley's orbit during the late 1960s. She had joined the Graceland staff in 1966 as an assistant, young and unassuming. Records showed she lived in a small apartment behind the mansion grounds, close to Elvis's private quarters. But by 1970, Lucy had vanished from public record entirely. Her employment ended abruptly, her name erased from staff lists. For decades, she was nothing more than a forgotten footnote in Presley history. Until now. Lisa found an old photograph in an archive box once owned by a former Graceland aide. It showed Lucy at a Christmas gathering in 1967, standing only a few feet behind Elvis, her hand resting lightly over her stomach. On the back, in faded ink, someone had written, "Lucy, December 67, radiant." Lisa couldn't breathe. The timing was undeniable. December 1967, exactly 2 months before she was born. By 2013, Lisa had located relatives of Lucy Dearbonnell still living in New Jersey. One cousin agreed to provide a DNA sample for comparison. When the results came back, Lisa's suspicions hardened into reality. The match probability was over 98%. The maternal connection was indisputable. Lucy wasn't just another woman in Elvis's circle. She was Lisa's biological mother. The discovery was both liberating and devastating. It meant the woman she had called Mom her entire life, Priscilla Presley, was not connected to her by blood. The bond she had spent decades trying to strengthen had been born of secrecy. She began to question every story, every photograph, every memory. Was her birth the result of an affair? Was she a child conceived in love, or a cover-up? In the quiet of night, Lisa pored through Elvis's old letters, lyrics, and notes. One scrap written in January 1968 caught her eye. In Elvis's unmistakable handwriting were the words, "Second chance. Family must stay whole. Protect the name." She read the line over and over, feeling her stomach twist. It was written 1 month before she was born. The pieces began to align into a grim picture. Elvis had married Priscilla in May 1967, a union heavily publicized as the fairy tale wedding of the decade. 9 months later, Lisa was born. But what if that timing wasn't coincidence? What if the marriage itself had been orchestrated to protect the Presley image after a scandalous pregnancy? Lisa uncovered financial documents showing payments from Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, to L. Dearbonnell throughout 1967. The payments stopped shortly after Lisa's birth. The handwriting on the receipts matched Vernon's. For Lisa, it was undeniable. Elvis knew. The king of rock and roll had not only been aware of Lucy's pregnancy, but had participated in hiding it. Whether out of fear, shame, or love, he had rewritten the story of her birth. And in doing so, he had built a myth that would define her and imprison her for the rest of her life. The next step was inevitable. She needed to confront Priscilla. In 2017, Lisa arranged a private meeting at the Beverly Hills Hotel. She arrived with a folder filled with DNA reports, hospital documents, and copies of Lucy's journals. Priscilla entered quietly, poised as always. When Lisa placed the evidence on the table and asked, "Are you really my mother?" the silence stretched endlessly. According to one insider, Priscilla's eyes welled with tears. She said only, "You're my daughter in every way that matters." For Lisa, that wasn't enough. It wasn't an answer. It was an evasion wrapped in love. The confrontation shattered what little bond remained between them. In public, Priscilla continued to appear composed, deflecting questions with grace. But in private, Lisa retreated further into isolation. Her trust was broken. Her sense of belonging was gone. She began skipping Graceland anniversaries and family tributes. Her absence spoke louder than any statement. By 2020, Lisa Marie Presley had made her decision. She would sever ties completely with the brand, the business, and even the myth. She stopped attending events, removed her likeness from Presley estate promotions, and instructed her lawyers to separate her image rights from Elvis Presley Enterprises. The move was unprecedented. For nearly half a century, Lisa had been the face of the Presley dynasty. Her withdrawal left the empire leaderless. But she didn't care. She wanted truth, not titles. Her public statement that year was brief but powerful. Truth matters more than bloodlines or branding. Those 7 words ignited a firestorm. Fans were stunned. Insiders whispered that the statement was a coded reference to the DNA scandal. Some saw it as betrayal, others saw it as courage. But for Lisa, it was neither. It was survival. She began selling off personal memorabilia, not for money, but for freedom. Guitars, gold records, letters, gone. Each sale felt like cutting away another thread tying her to a life built on illusion. But fate, as it had so many times before, intervened cruelly. On January 12, 2023, Lisa Marie Presley died suddenly at the age of 54. The news stunned the world. Tributes poured in from fans, musicians, and friends. Yet beneath the grief lay confusion and chaos. As the sole heir to Graceland, Lisa's death threw the Presley estate into legal turmoil. Her daughter, Riley Keough, was named successor, but questions immediately surfaced. If Priscilla wasn't Lisa's biological mother, did that affect Lisa's legitimacy as an heir? Did the Presley fortune now rest on a lie? Within weeks, lawsuits began to emerge. Some claimed Lisa's inheritance from 1993 was invalid if her birth had been falsified. Others alleged DNA fraud or misrepresentation in estate filings. The Presley legacy, once unshakable, was now mired in doubt. And while lawyers battled in court, the world outside devoured the story. Tabloids splashed headlines across front pages. Elvis's daughter or DNA deception. The mother hidden behind Graceland's gates. Presley legacy in crisis. For the first time since Elvis's death in 1977, Graceland was not a symbol of nostalgia. It was a crime scene of secrets. The public reaction was polarized. Half the fans clung to the fairy tale, insisting Lisa Marie was Elvis's daughter no matter what the tests said. The other half demanded answers, calling for transparency from Priscilla and the Presley estate. Social media turned into a battleground of conspiracy theories and grief. Hashtags like #PresleyDNA and #TruthAtGraceland trended for weeks. Television networks aired documentaries dissecting the timeline of Lisa's birth. Genetic experts debated on talk shows. Some called her discovery a victory for truth. Others saw it as the destruction of an American legend. But for those who truly knew Lisa, it wasn't about fame or scandal. It was about a woman who had spent her entire life trying to understand who she was. In her final years, Lisa had begun writing a memoir, a deeply personal account of her life, her search for truth, and her disillusionment with the Presley dynasty. Friends say the manuscript was nearly complete by 2022. In one of her last entries, she wrote, "I was born into a lie, raised in a performance, and loved by ghosts." The manuscript remains unpublished, locked away in the care of her daughter Riley. Rumors suggest it contains the full truth about Lucy Dear Bonnell, Elvis's involvement, and the sealed records that began it all. After Lisa's death, Riley reportedly vowed to preserve her mother's legacy with honesty, not myth. She wanted the truth to be known, Riley told a close friend. Even if it breaks the legend, it frees her soul. But questions linger. Did Lisa ever receive absolute proof beyond the DNA match? Did Priscilla ever confess privately? Or did both women take their secrets to the grave? In the months following Lisa's passing, Priscilla appeared publicly only a handful of times. Each time, she spoke only of grief, never of the rumors. Her silence has become as legendary as Elvis's songs, a silence that speaks volumes. For the Presley empire, the scandal has left permanent scars. Graceland continues to attract tourists, but behind its gleaming gates lies a story of deception, identity, and pain. The dynasty that once stood as a symbol of American glamour now stands as a reminder that even legends are built on human fragility. And so, Lisa Marie Presley's story ends where it began, at the crossroads of truth and myth. Was she the daughter of Priscilla Presley or of Lucy Dear Bonnell? Was she born from love or from control? The DNA results suggest one answer. The silence of those left behind suggests another. What's undeniable is that Lisa Marie spent her life in pursuit of something most people take for granted: the truth of her own identity. For her, that truth was worth everything. Worth the loss of fame, the pain of betrayal, and even the collapse of a dynasty. She once said in a private interview, "People think I was born lucky. But they don't know how heavy a crown feels when it isn't yours. Perhaps that is the truest way to remember her. Not as the heir to the king, not as the child of scandal, but as a woman who dared to peel back the illusion and stand in the wreckage of truth. In the end, Lisa Marie Presley's legacy is not defined by the name she carried, but by the courage it took to set it down. She may have walked away from Graceland, but in doing so, she found something far greater: freedom. And that, perhaps, is the most fitting tribute to the daughter of rock and roll. Not a life of myth, but a life reclaimed, one secret at a time. In the months that followed Lisa Marie's death, the Presley mansion felt different. The usual sound of guided tours echoing through Graceland's marble halls was muted, replaced by something heavier, a quiet unease. The staff who had worked there for decades whispered that her spirit lingered, not as a ghost, but as a question no one dared to answer. Riley Keough took possession of the estate in late 2023. At first, her focus was survival, sorting through financial disputes, probate filings, and media frenzy. But tucked deep inside one of the Graceland storage rooms, she stumbled upon something unexpected: a sealed chest, wrapped in brown paper, labeled simply, "Property of LMP, do not destroy." Inside were dozens of handwritten letters, cassette recordings, and folders marked with years: 1967, 1968, 1970. They weren't Lisa's notes. They belonged to Elvis. Riley spent nights reading through them in silence. Most were fragments of thought, scrawled on hotel stationery. But one letter stood out. Dated January 25, 1968, 7 days before Lisa's birth. It read, "To my little girl, if the world ever tells you you came from somewhere else, know that I wanted you. You were not an accident. You were a promise I couldn't keep the right way, but you were mine. Always. Daddy." Riley wept. The letter was written before Lisa had even been born. It was clear Elvis knew something that the world did not. Over the following weeks, Riley began cataloging the contents of the chest. Among them was a faded photograph of a young woman holding a newborn wrapped in a pink blanket. The woman wasn't Priscilla. It was Lucy Dearbonnell. The back of the photo bore Elvis's handwriting again. "Two loves, one life. Memphis, February 68. It was proof, not just of Lucy's existence, but of her connection to Lisa. For decades, that single photo had been buried beneath memorabilia, deliberately hidden away. Riley faced a choice. She could expose the truth, risk dismantling the Presley legend forever, or protect the illusion her mother had died trying to escape. In 2024, she quietly arranged a DNA verification through a private laboratory in Los Angeles, using samples from Elvis's preserved hair, Lucy's surviving family members, and Lisa's medical files. The results confirmed what Lisa had long known. Lucy Dearbonnell Fowle was her biological mother. The story was no longer speculation, it was scientific fact. But instead of releasing the findings, Riley did something unexpected. She locked the report away. According to one family friend, Riley told her team, "The world already took everything from my mom. Her peace, her childhood, her truth. They won't take her mystery too." Behind closed doors, however, she began negotiating with documentary producers for a project titled Presley, The Truth Buried at Graceland. The film would blend Lisa's recordings, Elvis's letters, and the DNA evidence, not to destroy the legacy, but to humanize it. The public, she believed, deserved to see that even the greatest icons were flawed, fragile people hiding behind the lights. Meanwhile, rumors spread that the Graceland archives contained even more hidden records. Legal documents showing sealed paternity settlements, handwritten contracts signed by Elvis's manager Colonel Tom Parker, and hush payments made to multiple women during the late 1960s. One former archivist claimed, "Graceland was never just a home. It was a vault of secrets." By 2025, interest in the Presley DNA scandal had reached new heights. Independent researchers filed Freedom of Information requests to unseal Baptist Memorial's birth records. Online forums shared leaked copies of hospital memos referring to Baby F, believed to be Lisa. The more the public dug, the more it became clear. Lisa Marie Presley had been right all along. Her story was no longer a whisper on tabloids. It was an epic of truth versus myth, of identity versus empire. Riley now speaks rarely about her mother, but those who have met her say she carries the same haunted grace Lisa once did, the burden of being born into legend, while longing for something real. In one of her only interviews, Riley said softly, "Mom didn't want to destroy the Presley name. She wanted to set it free, and I think she finally did." At Graceland today, tourists still walk through the pink walls of Lisa's childhood room, past the gold records and the piano where Elvis once sang lullabies. But somewhere behind those walls, sealed away in a private archive, lie the papers that could rewrite everything. A birth certificate that was never supposed to exist, a photograph that proves the impossible, and a secret love that changed music history. And maybe that's how Lisa Marie Presley would have wanted it. Not as scandal, not as revenge, but as a final act of truth. Her silence has ended, not in words, but in the echoes left behind. Because sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't fame, but freedom.